Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SAP TechEd 2022 and the online workshop session, which is under that name here. It goes with the ID XP281, and the title it is Monitoring and Ops Automation for your Cloud application and the SAP HANA Cloud within the SAP BTP. So yeah, I'm sharing my screen as of now, and that's the link to the repository. It is publicly accessible, and you can browse and navigate, and together with Dimitar and also with our team within the software logistics in SAP, we try to document in details all the steps needed to be followed to execute the 3 exercises that we have prepared for you. And however, before going and then jumping into the details, because that's going to be a really interactive session, and we won't spend time in marketing and nice presentation, but still, let me just align on the expectations that within that session, we're going to cover mainly our tools within the Ops Automation portfolio in BTP for alerting and automation remediations. So those two capabilities basically are covered by the SAP Alert Notification Service for SAP BTP that provides an alerting engine, so you can consume and also you can push some events based on events ingested into the alert notification service. And the automation pilot, it is a low-code, no-code automation engine that it's gonna be used to automate repetitive actions or apply some remediations based on configurations that we have applied. Of course, to do so, we thought that it's gonna be nice to show how those two products can be bind and related to different products offered by SAP itself. So therefore, we have prepared a use case which is gonna cover a combination between those two products interacting with a business application that is going to be built on SAP Business Application Studio. And on top of it, as a final step, we're going to cover as well those two products interacting with SAP HANA Cloud. So you can really see how powerful those tools are, how flexible they can fit and interact between each other, and also they can extend their capabilities and trigger awards and automated remediations to different SAP products. And not only, because we are not only bind to the SAP ecosystem, but those two products also can interact with third parties outside SAP. However, within this workshop, we're gonna keep our use cases within the SAP BTP only. So within the requirements, we have specified that you should have access to the SAP BTP Business Application Studio. You should have a trial account for the SAP BTP itself. And the good news as well is that we're gonna use free version of all the services and tools that we're gonna see. And as well, we're gonna use the trial account for the SAP BTP. That means that it is not needed even to register for pay-as-you-go or a completely paid, let's say, the account for the BTP in order to do a small POC, a validation, or just play with the use cases that we're gonna show within the upcoming minutes and maybe even hours. So yeah, that being said, just one note is that within the SAP BTP, we're gonna create actually 2 sub-accounts. over again, that's needed because we want to get most out of the free versions of the services that and applications that we're gonna use. And as of now, the automation pilot, it is available as a free version on the Singapore landscape, which is under the code AP21. However, the HANA Cloud and the alert notification, they are available on the US East landscape, which is US 10. That's this why we're gonna provision two separate sub-accounts. However, by doing so, we also will demonstrate that the automation pilot application, it is capable to interact with services which are and applications which are deployed and enabled in different landscapes. Our differentiator, one of our differentiators within the automation pilot, it is that it is fully cloud application, and you don't have a dependency that in order to interact with some services or applications, you need to provision the respective automation pilot within every single sub account that you have in your global account, but it's only needed to provision one global, let's say, automation pilot in just one sub account, and then you're not limited and you can interact with all other sub accounts with the applications and services within your the global account. So as well, how to obtain support. Dimitar, it's my colleague who really supported me along the way. As well, credits to the whole automation pilot, the notification service team, and you know, Ivan from the automation pilot, who also was supporting me quite a lot during the last months to set up those scenarios. However, if later on you watch that the recording and you have any type of questions, here you can find our email, so do not really hesitate to drop an email. The feedback provided by users of our products who are really interested in and who plays with those products are the most valuable for us, and we're gonna tackle that with priority. All right, so as a quick introduction, that it is. So now let's jump and actually let's play with the SAP BTP and the products within it. So going to exercise number 1, what we have here, it's a very quick overview just before jumping into it. So we're gonna build the business application. We're gonna build a cloud application that it's gonna be used on our second use case. And in order to do so, we will use, as I mentioned, Business Application Studio, and we will show to you how easy it is to build that application and deploy it to our respective BTP account. And the Cloud Foundry runtime that it's going to be enabled, we're going to use some of the templates that we have here. And yeah, we will authenticate, and then we're gonna create the configurations, the deploy configurations, and which are here. Yeah, the deploy config. We're gonna prepare the package with the build MTA project command, and then we're gonna deploy it. So yeah, let's just go and see how it works. So yeah, I will go to my BTP homepage, which is over here, and I will click on my link to go and access my trial accounts. And as you might see, I have multiple. And okay, that's not needed as of now. So I will be creating one account, sub-account here, which is gonna be named TechEd XP281. Then within the regions, I would like to, for that sub-account, to enable the alert notification service and HANA Cloud as a second step. And therefore, I will be using US East here. And pretty much that's all needed. Subdomain, it gets automatically. I click on the button create, and I see that it started the provisioning of that sub-account. As already mentioned, we need a second sub-account that it's gonna be needed for the automation pilot. So this is why I'll add the same name. Yeah, it says that the name is already existing, but here I will add automation pilot as a kind of a prefix that will help me later on to distinguish the two sub-accounts. And the automation pilot, it is available on more than one, of course, landscapes, but when it goes to the BTP trial, the BTP trial license, it supports as of now two landscapes. So the automation pilot, it is enabled as a free version for the Singapore CFAP21. So this is why I choose that one. And here it goes. All right. And then I will access this one. TechEd XP281 for now. I will keep the Singapore landscape in process as of the moment. So here we see that the sub-account has been created. So as a first step, I will enable the Cloud Foundry. And it goes with a standard plan, fair enough. And as an instance name, all right, I'll use this one as of now. All right, so that is in process. In order to set up some permissions and to be able to deploy the applications, which will be the application that we will create in the upcoming step, I need to provision some technical user, and I already have created such a user, but I need to add that user to this sub account and later on to the space that it's just gonna be created now. So I will name it simply dev because we're gonna use it for dev purpose. All right. Good. And then, yeah, the dev space has been created. And as I mentioned here, I will set up some users for the purpose of technical users. So here I will create, I know the username, email address, which is this one. So yeah, that's I will use the email also for the username, and I simply click create. One note, it's to make sure that you assign the needed row collections to the users that you just have created. So simply click on the username and then navigate to the button assign row collections here. And yeah, you can browse and find out what type of row collections particularly you would like to assign to any of the users in question. So just to make sure that we have the needed permission. So I assign plenty of row collections to those users. All right, so then let's navigate back to the home page, to the overview page of my sub account, and then I will go to the space, the dev space that I have created. So over here, we also can add the user, the technical user. So I just type it. And I assign the needed permissions. Yeah, I will use that user later on. So then once the technical users have been set up, I need to enable the Business Application Studio. And in order to do so, I go to the entitlements and subscriptions. Add service. Let me see if the Business Application Studio is already enabled. No. All right. So first I need to enable that the possibility to provision that application by setting it up into the entitlements. And as you see, I find it and I click just on the trial, and that's the application plan. And I can click save. One note, however, is that for the purpose of the application, I need the authorization and the first management service as well. So I will provision it. All right, it goes into the application plan as well. I click save. All right. And also, as I mentioned before, we need the alert notification service and HANA Cloud that it's gonna be used. So for the HANA Cloud, we go with that plan, which is HANA, that's a SAP HANA in-memory database. Just click on the two checkboxes and add these to the service plan. But do not forget to click on the button save. And then we see that the configuration of the entitlements, it is in process. And once it gets saved, we can navigate to the instances and subscriptions. We see that the whole list it is empty except the entry for the environment. But going into the service marketplace, now we can find actually the applications that we want to enable. So let's start first with the SAP Business Application Studio. Okay, it goes in a trial. Fine enough. Then, as I mentioned, we need the authorization and trust management service as well. Application, Cloud Foundry, it gets enabled into the dev space. Yeah, we see that we need a CLI friendly name for that instance. So let's just name it authorization. Okay. We won't specify any within the JSON format for the configuration instance of that application. We click create. And in order to save some time, because we have plenty of things to show, we're gonna provision the SAP HANA Cloud as well. HANA Cloud TechEd XP281. All right, one note it's here that in order to enable the HANA Cloud, you need to play with the JSON configuration. And here you have some tips. So we need to adjust some of the parameters. So the storage, it goes as 220 gigabytes. The virtual CPU, we go with 2. The memory is 30 gig RAM. And all right, so we need to add the password. Let me access my super safe password. Of course, that's a temporary one, and it is not a sensitive information because this instance will be deleted after the TechEd demo. It goes in a plain text, but still, it is a temporary one. All right, then let's click on the create. That being said, we have all the applications and the services already in place. HANA Cloud, it's in a process of creation that will save us some time because it takes a couple of minutes to be provisioned. So we can then jump into the SAP Business Application Studio. We have already created the technical users. We should have access to it. So let's play and build our application. All right. So then we click on that button, create dev space. And here we can say it is TechEd XP281. We're gonna use we're gonna create SAP UI5 application. So therefore, we're gonna keep the SAP Fiori as the setting for that dev space. All right, and we won't choose any of the additional SAP extension for now. It's not needed because it's gonna be really light application. And we see that the dev space already, it is in a state of starting. Okay. All right, so we see perhaps one limitation within the trial account that we might have just one HANA Cloud instance. So meanwhile, when till the TechEd XP281 space gets provisioned, I will navigate to my other HANA Cloud over again for test purpose, which is here, and I will delete it and we'll retry the creation of the HANA Cloud in the previous sub-account that we have just created. So that's the HANA Cloud trial. Yeah, it is. We click on the delete button and it should be deleted, and we can retry the step over again. All right, we see that the space, it is still in starting process. And in the upcoming minutes, it will be created. So we can use that time to access the TechEd XP281 automation pilot Singapore sub-account. So over here, over again, we can enable the automation pilot. So we can configure the entitlements because it is not enabled by default. We click on it, we see the free version of that application as well. Then let's save. All right. Going to the service marketplace. Click on the automation pilot. And let's create it. Then going back to the HANA cloud that I had created before, and it was this kind of limitation. Yeah, we see that has been deleted, and then I will retry the creation of the HANA cloud within my sub account that was just created. All right, so that is also in a deletion process. So I will focus now on building the application because the TechEd SAP Fiori dev space just has been created. So I just have clicked on it and I'm redirected to the view of that of the business application studio. So right. So from here we see the options, the different options such as start application from template, config, fun. However, we gonna use the palette in order to find the needed command. And it goes with, first we need to authenticate and see that all the needed access it's in place. So we type Cloud Foundry login and it goes with the autocomplete. Clicking on the icon, we are redirected to the login for the Cloud Foundry. So one note, it's just to make sure that the Cloud Foundry endpoint, it is the correct one, because if I go back here and if I navigate to my TechEd sub account, into the overview screen, then as an endpoint, we see this one. I will copy it. So it is API Cloud Foundry US 10.0.0.1. And by default here, we see something different. So just make sure that you validate that endpoint as well. So as credentials, yeah, enter your username. That's my technical username that I just have been added few steps before. And as a password, let's see, I have added my password. All right. So yeah, we see that the authentication, it is successful. I am signing into the Cloud Foundry, and now, now I need to pick up the Cloud Foundry organization. So based on the name here, the prefix, we see the trial global account, and then we see the sub account that it is included here and that it's of our interest. All right, and then we can navigate into the Cloud Foundry space. All right, just click apply, and then we see that the organization and space have been just set up. All right, so that it's done. Then we need to create a simple UI5 Cloud application. And over again, we're gonna use the available commands within the command palette. So we can search for the Fiori generator. And it goes from the view command palette, Fiori, which is this one. Open application, Fiori, open application generator. That will open a template wizard with a couple of different options to be picked up in order to build our application. So as an application type, we're gonna use SAP UI5 Freestyle. And then we have different type of templates. And for our purpose and demo, we have picked up the SAP UI5 application. So just select on that, and then you're gonna be redirected to the next steps within the wizard, which are to specify the data source, because we are looking really for a lightweight cloud application. We go with none as a data source as of now, but of course we can, or you can extend it later on. As a view name, I'm gonna keep just the default one. As a project, so we're gonna type, let's say, TechEd XP281. Application title.
Don't forget to make the module name lowercase.
All right. Thank you, Dido. All right. Then yeah, this description, I will keep it as it is. And yeah, then let's just click on the finish. And we see that as of now, the process of installing of dependencies has been started. And the application will be provisioned very soon. While we are awaiting that process to be completed, I will navigate back to my TechEd XP281, and I would like to set up finally the HANA Cloud. Okay, let's go through the service marketplace over again. Okay, or again, we need to set up the memory, the storage, the virtual CPU, and to add the password, the temporary password. Okay, let's go with it. The installation of the dependency, it is still in progress. Okay, yeah, we see that prompt that I have missed to add the project to the workspace. So now I will add that project to the workspace, and here it goes. That's the TechEd XP281 application with the whole package, including the web app, the views over there, and the app view itself, components, UI5 local YAML files, Git ignores manifest, and we see plenty of data that gets into that. So yeah, then as a next step, of course, because that's very simple application, and we would like to have at least some modification of the homepage, so at least it has something within it. And I will try to show to you the options to build the homepage, or just to modify the homepage with the built-in layout editor. And as I mentioned, our target is to build applications with low code or almost no code capabilities, and on top of it, to operate them with similar tools. So yeah, I have clicked on the view, and then I have chosen the open layout editor. Now it is in a process of loading. And once it gets there, yeah, here it goes. We can see some controls which are quite intuitive. So there are drag and drop elements, and as well we can play it with some configuration of those elements. And we want to add at least one icon. Let's say here, the icon we can modify it. So instead of a doctor, we go with quote. Fine enough. An example, we can play with the size of the icon. So we can modify it, and maybe we can add at least some text here, which is gonna say, welcome. Welcome to TechEd XP281. All right. And okay, I won't spend more time playing with those. So that being said, we are good to go and actually proceed with the next steps. We have modified the application, and now we would like to deploy it finally and see how it looks like. So in order to do so, we're gonna use the options for the to code the command through a palette. And from here, we can type run-task, which is this one. Then we see a couple of options to configure that task, but we will pick up the npm one. Now we see the subtask within the folder of the npm, and we are looking for npm deploy config. Which is this one, and npm deploy config, and then it goes our application TechEd XP281. Okay, we continue without scanning the output, and then we see within the terminal that we are adding the configuration. Now we can use the arrows to pick up the target, that it's Cloud Foundry. And as a destination, we're gonna pick none. Are we keen to add the application to a managed application router? Yes, we are. And then we see that we have updated the MTA YAML file. So we have created access security JSON, access app JSON, and UI5 deploy YAML file on top of it. Later on, we're gonna use one of these files in order to build the package itself. Okay, so the terminal has been closed, and then, as I mentioned, we're gonna use the MTA YAML file in order to build the application. So what it's needed, simply we need to access that file. You see that the module has been open within the screen here. And in order to build the package, we click on the file, and then we pick up the build MTA project. Now we see that command has been started in our terminal. Yeah, and we see as well that the MTA archive has been generated and it is available within that destination. All right. So that being said, all right, the terminal has the command has been executed successfully. We are glad about that, and then we can go and actually proceed to the final step, which is to deploy that application into our sub account and see how it looks like. In order to do so, over again, we go through the view and command palette. And we can open the application info overview screen. Fiori, in order to do so, we type Fiori, open application info, all right? We simply click on that option and then we will be redirected to the project application information with the project details, and it has quite valuable information for us. And further on, the SAP Business Application Studio provides some guidelines to our developers and users, so we can pick up like what we would like to do as a next. Are we keen to preview the application, manage service models, and so on and so on. But we would like to read it as it's something that we are confident with. We are keen simply to deploy it to our target. So we click on the deploy application tile, and then we see that a new terminal has been initiated. We as well can see that there's a deployed MTA that has been detected for the TechEd XP281, and couple of services as well has been enabled, such as the TechEd Access UA and Access UA server and the destination service. Right. Okay, just I navigate back to my TechEd sub account to see how it goes with the HANA Cloud. Yeah, now it gets provisioned and everything is fine. One note is that within we expect, okay, the point module that's still in progress. So we expect the application to be able to be consumed through the HTML applications tab within the BTP. And in order to do so and to be able to see the application through the application router, we need to enable the SAP Launchpad service because it is a dependency to be accessed. And yeah, I will simply do so. Launchpad, it is not available through the service marketplace, most probably because it has to be provisioned first through the entitlements. Okay, here it goes. Standard application, save. Okay, we are saving the entitlements, and then once the process gets completed, I will navigate to the instances and subscriptions in order to enable the business application, to enable the Launchpad service. Okay, I will go through the service marketplace actually. Launchpad service. Okay, it gets through a plan standard. All right, the Launchpad service, it is in the process of provisioning. Meanwhile, we can inspect how the deployment went of our application. And all right, so we see that deploying content has been completed, process it is finished. The destination service also, and the runtime Launchpad, it is specified as well. All right, so it looks that everything is fine. The Launchpad service also just has been created. So now if we go back to the HTML5 applications tab here. Right, so we see the application name, TechEd XP281, that it's accessible. And over again, it can be consumed as a managed application router through the SAP Launchpad service. This is why the Launchpad was a dependency. And by clicking on that link, we will be enabled to our homepage. All right. Here it goes. So that's the icon that we have added and the text as well. And here it goes, the title of the application that we configured during the setting up of that application. So yeah, what we have achieved, basically, we have enabled plenty of services and application within our first exercise. We have set up the technical user, and as well, we have created through the Business Application Studio an application with no-code knowledge using just provided commands, provisioned and accessible through the Business Application Studio. And then with no code, we managed to deploy the application and access the application through the SAP BTP cockpit as well. So yeah, plenty of things. That's the end of exercise number 1. Then let's go and actually see what are the next steps for that application, because let's assume that our application is live and we are very happy about it, but also we would like to make sure that in case something happens or an issue occurs with, let's say, with the networking or with a dependency service within the SAP BTP or with our code base, and for some reason the application is not accessible, we would like to be notified about that immediately. So therefore we can correct and figure out what had happened and fix the issue. So how we can achieve that? Obviously, we need the alert notification and the automation pilot, but there are a few steps that we need to take care, which are related to our application itself. Because as maybe I can go back to the TechEd repository here and navigate to exercise number 2, because we have prepared the diagram that explains what we want to achieve. So yeah, as well, you can check the capabilities of the alert notification service, the diagram here, and for the automation pilot. I won't spend time now. As I mentioned, that's really practical session. So our use case, it is the following one. That's the application that we have just deployed, And here we're gonna have the automation pilot. The automation pilot will be the engine that will fire repetitive and recurrent checks, health checks, using this the file, which is health check endpoint. Actually, we're gonna provision a dedicated health check endpoint within the application that is gonna be accessible to the automation pilot to be checked. And in case the response it is 200, then the automation pilot won't do anything more. However, and here you don't see the alert notification because the DevOps team, it shouldn't be bothered at all. The application, it is accessible and everything, it's cool. However, in case the automation pilot does absolutely the same exercise, calls the health check endpoint, and the response it's anything else but not 200, then we can set a condition within the automation pilot. Based on that condition, the automation pilot can trigger an alert. As actually it is a custom event to the automation pilot, and then the automation pilot can notify the DevOps team about the fact that something had happened with the application and it is not accessible. So yeah, main question, however, it's how to set up the endpoint as of now, because as a node, that application, all the resources for that application as of now, they are they're restricted because of the Access UA service. So you need to be authenticated in order to access to any of these. And on top of it, there's no any other resource that we can use as an endpoint, but we can simply code the index HTML and maybe some other homepage of the application, but it is not a good practice. And therefore, we are willing to create such an endpoint. So in order to do that, we need to...
Before we jump in the practical part, sorry for interrupting you, I just want to remind our audience that you have the option to use the Q&A tool, and you're very welcome to. You can, of course, ask also questions about the services you're seeing, not only strictly to the scenario. And as you see, we're doing this scenario for a very simple application now, but this is also applicable to much more complex applications, APIs requiring complex authentications, false procedures, etc. That was my interruption.
No, it's a good note, absolutely. Thank you, Dido. So yeah, with that note in mind, of course, for the demo purpose and for the demo time, the use case, it's not that complex, but really you can think as a concept, and later on that concept can be applied to much more complicated scenarios. So then, as I mentioned, we need to add the endpoint. So in order to do that, we can create a simple HTML file. So we need, over again, to access the code base, which is accessible through the Business Application Studio, navigate to the web app folder, and from here, actually, we can create a new file. Okay, and it's gonna be named health check. Okay, where it goes. New file, health check HTML. Okay, and within the repository, I have created a very, very basic HTML code. In order to keep our time, I will just copy pasting from our repo, and it has some title and so on. So that in mind, we already have the health check endpoint in place. it is stored, it is accessible through the code base. But as I mentioned, it is not, it won't be possible to be accessed without providing any authentication. So in order to move forward with that process, we would like to enable that file, and therefore we're gonna modify the XS app JSON file. Over here, we see all the configuration for the different resources which are available to be called, and what the authentication type it is, the destination service that has been used, and so on. And the configuration changes that we are willing to apply as well are included into our GitHub repo. I'm copy pasting from there, and it looks like that. So what we say, what we include as configuration is that the source, which is health check HTML, and we're gonna use the HTML5 app repo service, and we're gonna enable the methods for get and post, and we won't have authentication behind that health check endpoint. So that in mind, we have completed our configuration. Anything, we won't change anything else within the XS app JSON file, but simply we will proceed to the build of the new package. Or again, we go to the MTA YAML file, we right click on it, and then we click the build MTA project command. That will open a new terminal. Okay, that's fine. And now we need to deploy it. So we go through the view, command palette, open application info. Actually, I could navigate just to the other tab. It was open. Click on the button, deploy application. We see the whole process of updating the service and deploying of the MTA version. Now we see the deploying of the content module for our application. Process finished. Okay, so let's just go back to our application. And here, if we type health check.html, that's interesting. Internal server error. Okay. Okay, there should be. There should be some trouble with it. So let me just try to identify it. UI5 YAML file problem, loading reference, SAP GitHub IO UI5 tooling scheme UI5 YAML JSON. enable to load schema for that resource. Okay. To be frank, I see that type of error for a very, very first time, but client network socket disconnected before securing TLS connection secure TLS connection was established. All right.
Looks like a
Interesting.
network hiccup.
Sorry, Dimitar.
Yeah, it looks like a network hiccup. So I was just.
So yeah, now it's gone. Yeah, indeed. It's here again. Let's see. Maybe I need to repeat the exercise over again when it goes to building the package. Just let's validate that the health check HTML, it is in place. That's fine. And then the access app JSON also looks good. The service, it is the correct one. All right, so guys, I will retry over again before moving forward. So I will build the project. Okay, so when it goes to building the package of the application, it looks that everything is fine because yeah, we see the TechEd 281 MTAR being created. So then let me go back to the application info, or maybe even I can try to open it or again through the command palette, Fiori application info. Yeah, it goes here. But let me just refresh it. Who knows? Maybe that will sort the problem out. View, command palette, Fiori, open application info, and deploy application. All right. We see as well updating of the service. That's good. All the service keys has been.
Currently, what is happening is that our application content is getting deployed in the services which are hosting it. And I think we're done.
All right. So yeah, it looks like the process has been completed. So now let me just try to open the homepage, or again, the homepage, it is accessible. But if I rename, if I change the endpoint, instead of index HTML, I will use health check HTML. All right. For some reason, it is not accessible, but in order to move forward, I will show you guys how it was supposed to look like, because I have tested it before that demo, and it was working fine. So if I go to the application, which is this one, as well, if I click on it, then it will load similar home screen. Okay, simple UI5. And then if I just change the index to health check HTML, voila, that was the expected the behavior of the application. So let's assume that it was working fine. Of course, with Dimitar, we want to debug what happened. Maybe it's a networking issue, but this is why it's quite needed to have the operations and the constant monitoring of our applications. So for now on, for the upcoming steps of the configuring the alert notification service and the automation pilot, I will use this endpoint, and that is accessible publicly. So I will just keep it here, and yeah, we gonna assume that we call our application the one that we just have created. So yeah, then let's move forward and see how we can put in place and then all together the alert notification service and the automation pilot. So far, now finally we can play with those products. So we have enabled the alert notification service, and okay, TechEd XP281, or maybe I have missed to enable the alert notification service. Authorization, HANA Cloud, destination. No, all right, fair enough. So I will do so right away. Yeah, it goes through the service marketplace, alert notification, the space, it is dev. So INS dev. I will leave the JSON configuration empty and simply I click on the create. And while the creation it is in place, I will access the automation pilot for the Singapore landscape that we have provisioned, because we need to integrate and actually use both of the services. So for the Singapore, it goes here. Before accessing the automation pilot, I need to make sure that we have the right row collections for my user. So I click on the assign row collection, and you see that some new row collections have been popped up here, such as automation pilot, admin, developer. So yeah, I will actually assign all of these to my row because I want to administer all of the resources within my sub account. So that has been done. So now I will go back to the instances and subscriptions view of my Singapore sub account. Okay, the same I will do for my AWS sub account where we have the alert notification service. Okay. Okay, we see that some strange error had happened as well within my sub account, where I have enabled the automation pilot. So let's navigate to my global sub account and see how it goes. When it goes to the alert notification service, that's already accessible, and we see the cockpit of the alert notification service. However, I'm keen to find out what had happened with the Singapore sub account. So I will try to open it over again. Okay, it is here. TechEd XP281 automation pilot. Okay. Maybe it's a temporary networking issue. So yeah, I see the option go to application. I click on it. We see the login, and assuming that I have assigned all the needed permissions / row collections to my sub account, to my user, I am able to access the automation pilot and I see the UI. So everything is cool. Then yeah, so here I will separate both of the screens. So we have the automation pilot over there and the alert notification service. So now what we need to build, it's an option within the SAP automation pilot to call the endpoint. So first step within the automation pilot, just let me go to it. It's to create a service account for our automation pilot. And we gonna say here automation pilot. As a permission, we gonna pick the read, write, and execute. And authentication type, we're gonna use the basic one. One note, it's that now it is the moment to copy the password because later on it won't be accessible, and if we need to store it, we need to do it now. So I will do so in a separate screen. Okay. And I simply close. Then we need to create a health check command within the automation pilot, and we can create a catalog. So let's say we can click here within the catalogs. We see that we have own and provided ones. And in our case, in order to, within the provided commands, we see the content that gets out of the box when we enable the automation pilot, that it's grouped in different catalogs, such as the commands for application lifecycle management, Cloud Foundry, Cloud Management Service, services, Dynatrace, HTTP operations, and so on and so on. So I wouldn't go through all of these, but really the amount of provided content, it's really big, and we can see how we can get most out of that. Of course, we can create our own commands, but in order to do so, I will, however, use an automation pilot command that already exists. So yeah, we go to the own catalog page, and however we create a new catalog that will group all the commands that we're gonna use in the automation pilot for the upcoming steps. So here the name is TechEd XP281. So let's use TechEd. Okay, let's just be TechEd. All right. So then within that catalog as well, we can store the input that just has been provisioned within the service accounts for the automation pilot. To do so, we need to click on the inputs, and then we can create our input. Okay, we see the catalog that we have created. So that input will be sorted and under that catalog. And as a name, in example here, we can input the automation pilot secret. All right. And now we can add the keys for that secret. So it goes as automation pilot secret. The logic is quite smart. So we have the detection that it is a sensitive string that can be protected. The description, I will leave it empty as of now. And here we can input the secret, the automation pilot secret key that we have created once we have provisioned the automation pilot service account. So just input this and store it. All right. So that being in place, we also now can configure different type of parameters that we will be using later on once we create the commands for automated health check endpoints. So in our case, we would like to create some input here. So I click on the inputs. I create over again on the create button, pick up the right catalog, and I used the name. It's gonna be Quote App Inputs. So basically that's gonna be including the inputs which will be called when we want to trigger the health check. So here we will use the app method. We will set up a name for the method that will be using the automation pilot by triggering a command, which is going to be from type string. I will keep it as empty, and then as a value, simply let's hit get. All right. So that's in place. We're gonna add a new parameter, which is gonna be named as endpoint. It's string over again. Yeah, it's quite meaningful. So I will skip the description, and then I have copied the endpoint that we're gonna use to fire the command to. So that's the endpoint that works. Just to make sure, I will double check it. All right, it works. So we are good to go. Then I will show you guys how to create the alert notification service keys as well and keep them within the automation pilot. So to do so, we need to access the alert notification service. Okay, just bear with me. Okay, it is here. So we can click on the create service key. Okay, and I have stored as well the commands needed for that purpose.
Okay, so you're looking for the configurations for the ANS service keys. By the way, those would be the configurations which would be tweaking what kind of credentials you want to use of ANS. Would it be basic credentials for this session, or it would be something more secure for a more productive use case? Maybe it's worth mentioning the point of the whole exercise of maintaining credentials in the automation pilot. So those inputs, as you might have guessed, are ways for you to store variable data which you don't want to have built into your procedures, which can be varying in different environments, and you would like to use the commands with different sets of data, basically to have some automations for a canary environment, for a productive environment, for different regions. So all such data, including credentials, you would store as inputs in the automation pilot, and then when running executions of your commands, you would be able to pick and choose what inputs you would like to use for them. Over to you, Biser.
All right, thank you, Dido. So yeah, I have found the needed configuration. So that being in place, we'll generate, as Dimitar mentioned, the service keys, which we will use later on to authenticate to the alert notification service. So and actually, I have found them that within the repo, so you can copy paste this from that repository as well. So and here we see the URL, the client ID, and the client secret for the alert notification service, and we can store those within the automation pilot, as also Dimitar mentioned. So to do so, we go into the inputs as well. We click on the create. We go with the TechEd XP281. All right. Then we copy the client ID as a name. Sorry, actually here we should specify the name of the whole input package that is gonna be used. So this way I'm gonna set ANS user input, click on create, and here we're gonna create the client ID and the client secret. So client ID, it's string, it's not sensitive, and then the client ID, actually it is the URL. Sorry, the client ID, actually it's the one that gets displayed here. Just make sure that you copy the right data. Okay. And we have the client secret. Okay, it is a sensitive one, and client secret goes here. All right. So that being in place, we can set up the command for, we can proceed now to setting up the command for calling the our health check endpoint. So in order to do so, we can navigate to the already provided commands, and here we can look for HTTP request. Right. Okay, so as you see, that's a already provided command by the automation pilot. It has multiple input keys with multiple output keys, and we can clone that command. We can specify the catalog, so which is TechEd XP281. So as a name, we can name it health check. Fine enough. So here within the input keys, we see a couple of, as I mentioned, options, but actually the ones which are interesting for us are the method. So now I will show you how we can output a method that it's already stored in our input keys. So it is a string. Okay. We click on the default value source to be an input key. Then here we see the quote app inputs and the app method. Fine enough, that's already set. Once the method is specified, we can set the URL, or that's the health check endpoint for our application. So, or again, we can disable the required option. So now we can check the input key and use the input keys that we have stored. Quote app inputs, and then endpoint. Okay, that's in place. So we have the method, the URL. So now we can specify the password, and the password actually it's gonna be okay, that's a sensitive one. So it's an input key, and it is the one that we have stored for the automation pilot secret, because the automation pilot will then also call the alert notification. So it is the input key automation pilot secret, and by default we see that the automation pilot secret entry, okay, gets selected. Okay, so having all of that, that's a kind of a starting point for our command. However, just before moving forward, make sure that you can remove some of the output keys, so you won't get bothered here. So in our use case, we are not interested in body, headers. Actually, we're gonna keep just the status. All right. So then we can proceed to adding an executor. And in order to do so, we can click on this button at here, add an executor. As a command, we're gonna use HTTP request. And as an alias, we're gonna set app health check. And we need to select on the here option over here. All right. So that being in place, we see that the parameters for that command are already included, and that we see the method which is execution input method that's gonna be taken from the command that we have set. We also see we also see the URL as well, which says execution input URL. That's as well gonna be taken from the cloud app inputs that we have created. So we won't need further configuration. So we can then access the output and change the output values for status, because as of now, it says type number, but the expression it's not set. And here we can just edit that and say that the output status should be outputting the status out of the command app health check. Okay, so that being in place, you can simply trigger the command and validate that so far the configuration it is correct, and it will fire and proceed with the needed data. Okay. And yeah, actually you see that it had passed successfully. And if you click on the output for the status, you see that the response that you get, it's 200. So now we can add a new step, which is to notify the alert notification service. Pretty much that's needed in case the application it is not successful. And of course, we need to set some conditions to that command, and we will do so. So to set the conditions, all right, and the command itself, we need to add an executor, or again, we click on the executor, click where we would like to place the executor, and then we find the needed command. Simply, we can type notify, and we see as a suggestion, send alert notification service event. That's also a command provided out of the box by the automation pilot. And here, as an alias, we can put notify, let's say ANS. All right. So now we need to configure the parameters which are coming with that command as well. So simply we can click on the edit, and as a data object here, we expect the automation pilot to provide a custom event JSON to the alert notification service, which it's based on a particular format. I have included that format within the Git repository as well. There's a link. What are the requirements for that format for the producer API of the alert notification service? So I, as of now, just copy paste that data from the Git repository. But in a nutshell, we can specify the event type, the warning, we can add some subject to the custom alert body, and as well we can set the resources such as resource type and resource name. Then within the password, here we can specify what type of password and out of the different passwords within our execution inputs can be called. So in our case, that's gonna be the ANS client secret. So we say simply execution input, and instead of password, we type
basically here we can reference the input entries of the command, and actually you should, I think, choose password, and in the password entry in the command screen you can set which default value this should have, and you can choose an input from there. So basically the value before was correct. We only need to step out, look at the command, and see if the password entry in the inputs has the right password for ANS. Yeah, that was correct. Password was correct. Yeah, with those expressions, you can very flexibly navigate to all the values in that command. So you'll be able to use JQ expressions. You'll be able to very flexibly work with the data in your automation. So if you step back just a bit and go to the inputs, we can now navigate to the command. If you scroll up, you can navigate to the password input here from that template that interface report. And yeah, I guess that we can update it not to come from the AutoPy secret, but from the wash notification service. I don't remember the name we gave to it. I do think you maintained it. If you drop down, you will see all the secret, all the inputs. Oh, we didn't maintain the ANS credentials in Automation Pilot. I guess.
I think I have created those.
ANS user input. Ah, here it is. Okay, so basically we should use the client secret here.
Yeah.
The input above, exactly. Oh, outfield. So now our command can talk to the wash notification service and fire notifications to it.
Yeah, and then within the user, we can specify also the user, the client ID for the notification service. Which goes as such. All right.
Yeah. We should, of course, not trigger a notification every time the command is executed. We should add a condition when to fire a notification.
So then, yeah, we click on the condition, and then we can type, we can specify the actual value. In our case, that's gonna be an expression which says that we would like that the output out of the app health check output and the status that we have within it shouldn't equal to the 200. All right, so now if we go, we see that all the needed parameters such as data, password, URL, and the condition as well have been set up. So what is left to be done when it comes to that command, it's the scheduling part, just to make sure we can go and access the scheduling options, the scheduling capabilities within the automation pilot. which goes under the schedule execution. Then we would like to schedule that command to be executed. Let me just find it, health check, all right, which also goes with the prefix of the catalog. So it's quite intuitive and you are sure that that's the right one. As a parameter, all of the parameters are already included. So we can navigate actually to the scheduling part, and we would like that command to be scheduled every 5 minutes. So in order to do so, we go to the hourly option. Sorry, let me see.
Yeah, exactly, the hourly option, and we pick points in the hour, the moments in the hour when we want to have that executed.
And then from the drop down within the minutes, we can choose all of those, because that setting means that if you choose just 30, then on each 30 minutes within the hour, the command will be fired. If you click on the 55, that means just 5 minutes before the end of the hour, the command will be fired. However, in our case, since, as I mentioned, we would like the command to be fired on each 5 minutes, we can click all of these. Of course, the scheduling feature is quite powerful, so you can play with hours, weekdays, specify particular months, deadlines, set the time and date if you would like to go really strictly. One note as of now, the time and date, it's within the UTC, considering also dependency of other systems. So you can make sure that once you specify that particular date here, it goes really as a standard time frame. So click on the schedule, and we can see that screen that pretty much explains that the command will be triggered on every 5 minutes. So having the command in place, what is left to be done? It's to configure the alert notification service, and the fact that we would like to send a notification to the DevOps team in case the application is not accessible. So in order to do so, I need to go back to the alert notification service and create first an action. In our use case, that's gonna be a very simple email as of now. Okay, that's the condition. So I type just simple email. I'm gonna be the recipient as of now. Within the subject template and the paywall template, I won't specify anything. So we can see all the possible data that gets ingested from the custom event fired by the automation pilot. Now we see the label that the email, it's not yet confirmed. So I can click on my inbox. I see this link here, this email that I just have received. I click on the link in order to confirm that indeed I would like to receive emails from the alert notification service, and then the label here will be changed. If I, yeah, it just has changed itself. Okay, then within the conditions, all right, I need to specify particular condition based on which the alert notification will filter out of the many different events that will be ingested. In our case, if we go back to the automation pilot, and the command. All right, it is the health check one. And we see that within the body of the notify execution, the event type, it's a manually set, and it is a custom award. So I will simply copy this into the condition of the alert notification. So here at the condition, we will say automation pilot custom award. Then within the event type, I will specify is equal to custom award. All right. Then within the subscriptions, now I need to bind actions with conditions, and in order to enable the whole the whole set of both of the artifacts. So here it's gonna type cloud app alert. We see that part of the conditions, the condition that just has been created is the automation pilot custom award. It's already available. And then it is a simple email, the action that we would like to trigger. So now what will happen? We have the automation pilot that it's that we already have scheduled the execution of the command. If we go into the executors, yeah, we see that the automation pilot successfully had executed that command, and it has been finished, and the status is it is 200. On top of it, we have set up the alert notification that it is expecting an event from the automation pilot, and if such an event gets pushed by the automation pilot, the alert notification service will send an alert to the DevOps. However, since the application it is accessible, the automation pilot won't fire that event to the alert notification service. And in order to tweak and indeed validate that the command works, I will play with the conditions. So instead of 200, I will change it, and it will say equals to 200. So that just for a demo purpose. Now, even if the application endpoint it is accessible, the automation pilot will fire that event to the alert notification service, and the alert notification service will send an email. And in order to speed it up and really do not wait 5 minutes, I will show to you how that looks like as a final result.
You have only a few seconds before the regular scheduled execution kicks in.
So, all right. Actually, I can trigger it as well. It's a good note.
No, I think it should have already been triggered. Can you check the executions and maybe refresh them? Yeah, it's already triggered. Okay, and Biser, as time is progressing, I would propose also...
And here it goes. So we see an example that the application, SAP UI5 application cannot be checked. We see the custom award and so on and so on. And yeah, so sorry, Dimitar, please.
I would suggest to also go through the third scenario of we have prepared for the third exercise.
Yeah, I can go through that, but indeed, since we are progressing, I will open the trial account where I have set it up. Just bear with me.
So I'll be just opening this. With this exercise, you already see all the configurations required to use the automation pilot or notification service BTP in order to set up such customizable monitoring of your cloud workloads. And the third exercise is extending those primitives with actually allowing the monitoring to dig a little deeper inside the database which your application could be using. We're using a HANA Cloud database for the purpose. And actually, the main difference here is to showcase how the automation pilot can also execute SQL statements against the HANA Cloud database. And the alert notification service has a wide variety of built-in events which are readily available for subscription. Coming from HANA Cloud, events related to user management, events related to operations which require action. For instance, some table or your database is running out of space, out of memory, etc., and you would need to configure it to scale it. So the catalog is pretty big. We encourage you to look in the GitHub repository and the documentation and to explore it.
All right. So when it goes to the third scenario, as well, since we have limited time, what we can see, it's the own catalogs which I have created. So here it's the catalog for the TechEd in example, and we have option, as Dimitar mentioned, to execute SQL statements against HANA Cloud. So in example, we can check a long-running statement for a HANA Cloud, which is accessible and which is HANA Cloud Award that goes and gets fired by the HANA Cloud, and it gets ingested into the alert notification service. And if that happens, then we can create a check long-running statement command from the automation pilot, which we will be getting the INS client ID and client secret as well. So then we can get an SQL statement. We can create an SQL statement based on the execute HANA Cloud statement command. As well, as you have seen, it is a provided command, and you can modify you can modify the parameters which are added into that which are associated to that command. So that's the statement string where we can provide the SQL statement which the automation pilot will execute towards HANA Cloud in case there's a long-running statement. And as authentication, we use basic authentication, and we use as well inputs for the password and the user that are stored within the automation pilot. Then as well, within the advanced tab, we can process the object, so the result raw format as an object, and we can play in order to have different set of array or other source of data transformation. So then we process the output, and we create a SQL statement output result, and then we send it over again. I mean, it's absolutely the same exercise as the one that you have seen when it goes to notifying the alert notification, with the caveat that we play with the data object. So instead of just sending some static data that the application, I see in the previous exercise, it is not accessible. Here, actually, within the body, we add the results out of the connection. We ingest the results for the connection ID and for the statement ID, and what it's the sum of the allocated memory size. I mean, we ingest all the data that goes out of the SQL statement here. Pretty much the idea behind that statement, it is to select the 1000 connection IDs which are available within the table active statements, and as suggested by the HANA Cloud recommendation action, in case of a long-running statement, we would like to gather further details about that particular statement and send these details to the DevOps team. And here it goes with the notification. So yeah, and if I go to the alert notification service, which it is here. Okay, just bear with me. Okay, that's the one. Then we can see that within the different subscriptions that I have set up, we have an option to forward the details, the response that we get out of the automation pilot to the DevOps team. So as well, the command, the condition that it's set in order to fire that subscription, it is set to HANA Automation Custom, the one that it's here, HANA Automation Pilot Custom, and we will transfer all the needed data to a simple email, or as well one of the delivery channels, also as per the diagram within our repository for the alert notification service. It's a team, it is firing a message to a team channel. So in case that happens, the alert notification service will fire that alert to that teams. So now we need to simulate long-running statement, and if we go to our repository.
Sorry to interrupt you. I don't think that we have the time to simulate that long-running statement.
Yeah. All right. You're right.
The cool thing is that the instructions, basically the SQL statement, how to do this, is in the repository. And yeah, having in mind that we are already 2 minutes over, I would like to thank all of our participants for joining. We'll continue to answer the questions. All the data, information, screenshots, materials you need to do this in a trial account of yours are available in GitHub. And yeah, of course, if you have further questions, even after TechEd, feel free to reach us. We'll be happy to have a feedback and to answer.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. And as well, thank you, Dimitar and Ramit, for organizing this and moderating it.